Rosemary Armao may be known from her as a panelist on WAMC shows The Roundtable and the Media Project. She's also an adjunct professor of journalism at SUNY Albany and RPI, and an editor of the online, news service, Who, What, Why. She's a former editor of the Organized Crime and Corruption Project and has worked on media development and training in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and North and Eastern Africa. She's a former head of the Journalism and Women's Symposium and of investigative reporters and editors in the US. She teaches writing, reporting, investigative techniques, disinformation in the media, and ethics. And I've enjoyed hearing her on the Roundtable and Media Project. I know she always goes right to the heart of the matter and doesn't pull any punches. So with that, I welcome Rosemary, and you can take over, and remember to unmute yourself and share your screen as you need.
Unmute it. Can you give up the screen, Fred?
Yes.
It's still okay. There we go. Let's talk about it. A few caveats before we begin. I've told some of you already, I love speaking to the Humanist Society. This is my third time, although the first time talking about politics, it's usually about journalism and ethics. So this will be a new experience. And I used to be a whiz at Zoom because that was the only way we could teach for 2 years, but I'm a bit out of practice now. So Fred, I'll appreciate help keeping track of chat. And but despite the fact that we're in our own little compartments now, I want this to be the same thing I've had the last 2 times speaking with the group, a discussion. You are welcome, in fact, encouraged to ask questions and bring up points throughout this whole thing. I don't see this as a lecture or a talk. I see it as a discussion. And I apologize immediately for not living up to who are the winners. We still don't know, as you know, we're still finding them out even as we go. We thought this would be fresh right after the election, but the downside is we don't know all the results yet. Despite that, I'm continuing to be really encouraged because I was one of those political pundits who got it all wrong ahead of time. And the other thing I want to say is that this is a recording. I'm going to make no apologies for what I'm saying. They're my own opinions. They have nothing to do with WAMC or RPI or UAlbany, of course. And if I misspeak, please correct me and push back. My RPI students are all little geeks, little engineers and IT people, and they're always tapping on their computers while I lecture, and they correct every first name or minor fact that I get wrong, they correct. And I love doing it. I think that's the great way. So let's get into it. I do not want to give a speech, as I told you, and I don't even want to decide what to talk about. I've made a list of all the possibilities. Here they are. And you're going to tell me I'm ready to talk and eager to talk about all these things, which come direct. Can you see this? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So you tell me, what do we want to hit? We'll do it in the order that you want, and include all of it, or none of them. We can take up something else entirely if you want, but I don't know what that would be. And so here it is. Issues that really mattered as it turned out, how the press did, how the pollsters did, the incredible role of gerrymandering and redistricting in this election, Donald Trump and the fate of his horrible candidates and election deniers, how the Latino voters did, youthful voters, voter turnout overall, early votes versus election day voters. We're seeing a real difference in the pattern of voting that's had an effect. Was this a Biden referendum or something else? The Republican surge in New York is getting a lot of attention. We don't know the full extent of it, I think, yet, but the Republican surge is New York turning purple. And then crystal balling the future after this election is over. And Frank, that was really, I think, the topic of your interesting commentary in the Times-Union. So what do you want to get into? What do you think?
Just start at the top and work your way down.
Should we do that? Should we do it? Okay. I will start that way then. Hold it. Okay. The issues that mattered. I think this was something that the Republicans really tried to control. They wanted to make it, of course, to their advantage, and they wanted it to be about inflation and economics overall and crime second. And the failure of Democrats in the past has been to always play reaction to what the Republicans bring up. I started to see that happening this election, but fortunately, November 8th came along and ended it. Inflation should have mattered more. The price of gas is really high, and again, there was a big jump just before the elections, which I find suspicious. No one else seemed to talk about that. Prices of gas don't jump 50 cents a gallon in 1 week unless they're being manipulated. Yet we didn't hear that discussed. Food prices are high. I feel that every day when I go into the supermarket. I know you do too. But the economy is not tanking in the way that high inflation and high prices usually indicate. Jobs market is extremely strong. The U.S. economy is still just chugging along. It's doing much better than Europe. So it isn't the usual thing. It was hard for, I think, the Republicans to argue that this is the thing that you should most care about. Plus the fact that they never offered a cure. Put me into office and here's what I'll do to fix inflation. They never told us that. And in fact, there's nothing they could have said. Biden is not the fault, is not to blame for inflation, and neither would be whatever Republican he might be replaced by. Just is not controlled that way. So that was not a winning issue for them. Crime, in some places, perhaps it was. They pushed that. I know Lee Zeldin pushed that very hard in New York, did have an effect in Long Island. It did have an effect because there's unhappiness with the bail reform of last year. But the exit polls do not show that it mattered. In some of the exit polls, not in New York, but in other states, it was like 4th or 5th was the listing. And that again is because there's no Republican solution to crime. What would they do? More police? And it was fake. Their attacks were fake. Democrats want to defund police. That was never pushed anywhere. In fact, Democrats that don't call it that, what we're talking about is revamping resources so that police don't have to do as much as they do now. That's different than defunding them. No place in America has really cut back on police funding. So that didn't work for them. And then you had the attack on Paul Pelosi. That was one of the biggest errors I think Republicans made. They made fun of that. You had Donald Trump Jr., Donald Trump himself making fun. Glenn Youngkin said, oh yeah, it's kind of bad what happened, but we're going to send Nancy home to be with her husband. She can protect him. It was stupid. It was stupid, and it helped to play into the Democratic idea that democracy was in danger. Those were the issues that the Democrats pushed. I happen to think they resonated. One was the danger to democracy of extremism, the Donald Trump type of extremism, and the other was abortion. What the Supreme Court did by overturning Roe v. Wade, I can't call it a gift because it was horrible, not a gift at all, but it certainly helped Democrats in this election. And that was really done in the summer when it happened, when the first leak came out of what the Supreme Court was thinking of. There was a big boost, and you heard pundits and you saw it in the polls that, wow, Democrats are going to turn out for this. And then everybody sort of bought into the idea that, oh no, that happened months ago. The voters aren't going to keep that in their head. They're going to look at gas prices instead. I never thought that was true. And indeed, if one result is resounding in this election, it's that abortion mattered. Young voters came out. More people came out, female voters came out in places we hadn't seen them before. And I understand the statistics aren't complete yet, but there's lots of evidence of that. And in any place where there was any sort of constitutional amendment or a referendum involving abortion, the pro-abortion side won, including in Kentucky. We saw this also in the summer when Kansas had their special election, and abortion brought out way more people than they expected, and a hugely pro-abortion vote. And that continued. I think that is still an issue. And of course, it played in and supported, it buttressed the idea that Republicans represent. Republicans bought into Trump, and he's an extremist, and he put democracy in danger. That resonated, obviously, I think, with the results we're seeing with voters everywhere. Whereas the Republican attack that Democrats are all socialists and we're going to like change the whole system, that did not resonate so much. In comparison to the Trumpers on the ballot, Democrats all look sane and reasonable. So that to me is are the issues that matter to, and I see that there's lots of stuff in the chat. Shall we, why did we not hear DeSantis talking about, or Dems rather, talking about the very good reasons for bail reform and why we needed it? Boy, that's a really excellent question. And I have faulted, I've been screaming about at the roundtable itself that puts David Soares on every week. He is a fine panelist, but he is not just a speaker. He's not a commentator. He's got a hand in the game. And as a DA, he's very anti-bail reform, and he's had a platform for weeks to talk about this. There's been complaints about this, and I think Judith Enck and others have really made a stab at getting the other side out there. But that is true. The governor, actually, Hochul, has been a pretty good spokesman for bail reform. The truth is, it could use some tweaking. And what's the big deal about that? We're going to have to tweak the gun laws that were passed over the summer. Go back and give judges a bit more discretion in cases that where violence is not evident. By doing it simply by statute, you have examples which are indeed true, where a judge could say, you know what, this isn't a violence charge, but look at what happened in this case. Look at the specifics of this case. I don't think this guy should get out. We don't have that now. That's to me, seems a very small tweak, and would still allow for the pluses of bail reform, which is we're not penalizing suspects simply because they're poor. So good question. It's encouraging that so many young people voted blue. Barbara, that's true in this election, but it's not anything that Democrats ought or liberals ought to rely on. This is a really strange group. They get involved in issues, but they break. The polling and the studies show that they'll break either way. They are true independents who will vote the issues and not the candidates. And climate is a liberal issue. So is abortion. What are some other things that gun control definitely is a youth issue that will turn them liberal, but there are also issues that could turn them out for Republicans. So I am encouraged, but not without some pause as well. Robert, as the world gets even more complex than it is already, can we ever expect voters to prioritize societal sustainability and survival issues over personal? If we're not seeing it over global change, over the threat of the planet burning up, I'm not sure that we're going to see it on anything else. Do any of you disagree with me on that? Anybody else want to speak up? Let's raise a hand and we'll unmute you and hear from other voices. Nope. Okay.
There's a lot of, I can read you some of the earlier chat.
Yes, please do, because I'm not seeing them here. Go ahead.
Sue Parry asked you to address the Republican surge in New York.
Okay, the Republican surge in New York. This goes under what I call the role of gerrymandering and redistricting. Do you realize that 6 seats, that may be the total majority that the Republicans end up with in the House, 6 seats. They were decided in only 2 states, New York and Florida. And that both of those are tales of redistricting. In Florida, DeSantis pushed through a map that is completely racist and wrong, unconstitutional. It's so bad that his Republican legislature said, no, we can't go with this. The court said, no, you can't go with that. It's wrong. And what did he do? He pushed it through anyway. And the court said, okay, we'll use the old maps while we decide it. In New York, the Dems were greedy. When we started the process of redistricting after the census, we had a chance, Dems had a chance to come up with a new map that would give them a slight advantage. They got really greedy and they went for a whole lot of seats. And this was thrown out, and Kathy Hochul, I think that's one of her many faults, signed that. So blaming Cuomo, I don't buy that. Yes, he did push for that. Cuomo's the one who pushed through the constitutional requirement that we have to have fair maps, which is what we should have in every state. And as I'm about to argue, we don't. So Kathy Hochul signs this ridiculous redistricting that is so bad it gets thrown out. Only here, the court does not say, okay, just use the old map and we'll figure it out later. They go, no, you have to have a new map. And here's the guy who's going to do it for you. And he picked, like, I don't know, some graduate student from Carnegie Mellon, who's a mathematician, who doesn't even look at like putting same districts together. The rule on redistricting is normally it's mathematical. Anybody can figure it. Any of my RPI students can do it. And that's what this kid apparently did. So Saratoga, for example, is not voting with the rest of the Capital District. That would not have happened if you had human beings familiar with the state putting together a map. At any rate, we end up with this terrible redistricting map, and the Republicans get way more of an advantage than they should, and they used it to their advantage. In addition to that, you saw Democrats playing games and fighting with each other rather than with Republicans. So Sean Patrick Maloney, for example, he lost. That's the big surprise in New York, but his district was changed, and he moved from his old district to a new one that he felt was safer. In doing so, he ousted what's his name, Mosier Jones, who probably, no way to know for sure, but probably would have won. And then he went ahead and lost it too. So that's 2 seats flipped and lost right there. So that's it to me. I think that what the whole country needs is fair redistricting and fair drawing of the maps. But we are not going to get it because the Supreme Court has already said, no, that's not up to us. You guys in the states do it. And each state does it differently. And you end up with this story of Florida and New York. And again, that's the whole margin of the what I think is going to be a Republican majority in the House. Completely crazy. Fred, you have another one for me?
Yep. Andy asked if you could discuss early voting versus voting just on election day.
Okay, another really interesting trend to me, and we saw it in 2018 as well. It used to be that the people who early voted or mailed in their votes were Republicans. They're the ones who start, just like healthcare. And then we have a whole flip. And Trump made it a bad thing. It was fraudulent. And Pompeo and Barr, they all said, "Oh no, yeah, there's lots of room for fraudulence if you use mail-in ballots." They made the boxes, if you turned in your ballots to boxes outside of polling places, they made that sound like, oh wow, this is really dangerous. So much so that we saw armed people intimidating voters, I think, in Arizona outside these boxes. So now it's flipped. And what we have is the early vote is overwhelmingly Democratic by the number, and same day voting is Republican. They wait and go and voting. I don't trust any of them. I always vote on election day because I can just see some challenge being offered to whatever kind of other voting system you use in New York, and my vote not being counted. But that makes a difference too. There's if last minute developments that can change a vote. If you're voting early, like the Democrats do, it doesn't, your vote's already in. You can't change it, right? So it's both a plus and a minus, but it locks you in early, and it gives Democrats now, they have an idea of where they are, I think, much earlier than Republicans do. It also, if there's any inconvenience at all, if there's a rainy day, if there's a hurricane in certain parts or a tornado in certain parts of the country, you are not going to get turnout on election day. So that makes the Republican vote much more vulnerable than it is right now. So I think that's something that we need to pay attention to and watch. I've said all along that there's no question that Republicans are trying to suppress the vote. And methods like this, stopping early voting, stopping or reducing mail-in balloting, absentee balloting, all those measures, those are bad. But you know what? We had much worse in this country during the voter civil rights era. People were being ordered to pay in order to vote. They were being kept out because they didn't have the right kind of identification, which could be anything that the people at the polls wanted. And Democrats overcame all of that by flooding the polls, by getting people registered, giving them rides, getting them to the polls and getting out the vote. And that's got to be the attention. I think we saw increasingly since Trump came in, you've seen Democrats spending time on getting out the vote. Here in New York, you have lots of people, I'm sure you have friends as I do, who spent time writing out postcards and making calls and even pounding the pavement in other states to get out Democratic votes. So that's all because of this. Trump was right about this. He knows how it plays and he went after it. But I think it's flipped on its head because of the Democrats have reacted in real time. The other thing on voter turnout that's really important, and it's connected to when and how you vote, is that since Trump, voter turnout in every election, on presidential election years and off, the voter turnout has been hugely high. It's looking like this year, 2022, will be a near record, but it didn't top 2018. But both of them are way above previous midterms. That makes a difference. So under the idea of how did the political press perform, I think they did a terrible job. I would give them a D if they were in my class. And that's one of the reasons, is that they're looking at old ideas and considering that they're still, that old analysis still holds. And the old analysis was the higher the turnout, the better the Dems will do, right? That's why Republicans traditionally have tried to suppress the vote. They don't want a whole lot of people voting out there. They only want their few, their votes to get out. That has changed. And you see now both sides trying to get their turnout out, to rev up the base, they call it now, to get out those assured votes. And I don't think we really know now who benefits. If there's a high voter turnout in New York, does that really help Democrats? Or does that mean upstate voters who tend to be Republican, they're the ones who are upset and they're getting out to vote? I think that's been just turned on its head. So I'll stop a minute and see if there's more.
Yeah, John Burns asked you to comment on youthful voters.
Yeah, the youthful voters, the final stats are not in. I've looked for them. As I said, Fred and I knew that this would be fresh coming this close to the election, but there would be some analysis that could be wrong or incomplete, and that is one of them. I do not have voter stats by age in any state. If you do, please let me know. I'd love to see them. But anecdotally, and some reporting and lots of first person articles that we're seeing, like the New York Times just ran a couple the other day, are saying that young people have voted more heavily this year than we have seen in the past. And again, I think the reasons are number one, abortion. Young women made a difference. That's great. And sorry, I told everybody I was busy, but they didn't all listen, of course. So young women voters made a difference. The other is climate, which was not, not spoken about a lot on the campaign trail, even by the Democrats. But look at what was happening. We've got huge money going into climate change and alternative energy from the Democrats who passed the Inflation Reduction Bill. You've seen us going back into the Paris Accords and what's happening next. Now we're in Egypt. All of this was in the news, if not exactly in the campaign financing, and young people were paying attention to that. But more than abortion, while that certainly was a driver, it's a portent. And what young people for the first time what we old people are seeing for the first time, is that the Supreme Court was able to take away a right. And Justice Thomas listed a whole bunch of other rights that maybe we ought to be worried about too, including same-sex marriage, contraception. That's huge for young people, of course. He didn't say this, but interracial marriage is buttressed by the same constitutional defense that the Supreme Court tore apart with Roe v. Wade, but with pulling it down. So all of these things are in danger. And young people paying attention to that. They do not want fewer rights than their parents had. So I think that is encouraging. I'm not willing. It's only one election. Another thing that I should mention is that pollsters got it wrong, because polls usually depend on likely voters, people who have voted in the past. These are not young voters. We don't have a record of lots of youthful voting. And so they are not reflected in the polls. It's another reason I think they were so off. Going forward, there'll have to be adjustments for that, but you also can't depend on them. The studies show that they will come out when they feel personally engaged, when there are issues that they care about, that matter to them, and they think that will affect them right away, not way in the future. The other thing that's really interesting is TikTok, which is increasingly becoming the social media platform favored by young people rather than Facebook, definitely not Twitter anymore with the Elon Musk mess. But TikTok had lots of stuff about voting. My kids who monitor it for me, and I've just joined it basically because I want to see what they're talking about. It's not verbal, it's not words, it's not writing, it's all video and young people talking to each other. Hugely political in ways that are entertaining and kind of fun, not in ways that I recognize as news. I got to tell you the truth. I don't quite get it yet, but they do. And that's what matters. So the youthful vote is very, very interesting. I'm jumping around here, but that's okay. To go back to the political pundits, I think they did terribly, D at best. One is because they're still relying on old analysis. Here are some of the other things that I found. Turnout, I already mentioned. Number two is it's the economy that matters, stupid. Remember that old saying? That's from the Bill Clinton era. Doesn't hold true anymore. We saw that inflation is as bad as it's been in most of our memories, and yet it did not hurt Biden overly. The idea that the guy at the top has to be popular or all the other votes below will be affected. The down ticket is affected. I think we've got to look at that again. We saw that first with Biden, who has low approval ratings around 40%. Yet Dems nationwide did way better than expected, way better than you would have been predicted. Here in New York, Kathy Hochul was not especially popular, yet down state tickets and all the other elected offices at statewide did great. And in places where the top guy was hugely unpopular, I'm thinking of Pennsylvania here, for example, Molinaro lost decisively. He was not well liked at all. And yet the Senate went to Fetterman. People are splitting their votes. And the pollsters and the pundits always want to say, no, they're going to vote a straight ticket. I think that's changing along with voting patterns. I think that is really changing, and we're not making enough, depending on that and analyzing that enough. And then my favorite is the idea of you have to have a defined message. You have to stand for something, right? You've all heard that. It's not enough just to hate Trump. We have to have a program of our own. That's what Democrats were told in 2020. What do you stand for? And Joe Biden this year went out on a limb and started talking about ultra MAGAs. He labeled them. Remember that? And he took a lot of criticism, including criticism from Democrats saying, no, we have to stand for something, not just against something. Labels count. They cut right through. And that label, Ultra MAGA, said, Republicans are extremists, watch them. And I think it worked. I think that's different. This is different than negative advertising, which is just mean and ugly. But this was labeling, and it's messaging and of a different sort. I've always given credit to Republicans for being far better at messaging than at Democrats, but I think Joe Biden struck a really good blow for other Democrats. I hope they'll learn from that. So that's it. So inflation and economy doesn't have to be the only thing that matters. People do care about other things. I think climate could be one of those. Definitely human rights is. Turnout is good for democracy, but it doesn't necessarily benefit one party over the other. Defined messages are good, but so are labels. And vote splitting is something that we have to live with. I think voters have learned how to do it. Okay, next.
Michael Crowell would like to hear about reforms to elections, the status of publicly funded elections, and ranked choice voting.
Well, that's an interesting one. First, I don't think you're going to see any meaningful reform in my lifetime. And the reason for that is Citizens United in 2010 is going to stand with the 6-3 supermajority Supreme Court full of conservatives who don't really care at all from the record on voting rights. So I don't think you're going to see meaningful campaign finance reform or voting reform in my lifetime. That's the truth of it, at least at the national level. States can do stuff on their own, and ranked voter choice is that's a really good one. The Republicans have been trying to slam it. You've heard it because, of course, Murkowski has she won yet? Do we know that? Does anybody know if Murkowski has won her race? I'm not sure. But they're slamming it because she at least has a chance, and Sarah Palin is out already, saying it's a crazy, confused system that favors Democrats. That is not true. It's actually a much fairer and logical way to vote than the all or nothing system we have. And I would love to see that spread. I don't have high hopes for it happening because we're just so stuck in the status quo. It's just like the Electoral College, which was a really fine idea back in the 1800s, in the early 1800s, when you were trying to balance big states and little states, rural areas, and the few cities we have. But now it's a completely unfair system that gives Wyoming more leverage than California. It goes where there is just protection under the Constitution rather where the populace is. It is time for direct election, but we're not going to get it. And why is that? First is the makeup of Congress and the makeup of the country, which is evenly divided. Second is great messaging by Republicans that, if you mess with the Constitution at all, that's a bad thing. Did anybody see, there's an article, it was Jill Lepore wrote it in Atlantic magazine about the unamendable Constitution. We have this, we always have bragged about what a great Constitution we have and how flexible it's been. And the truth of the matter is we haven't had an amendment since the 25th Amendment, I guess, was the last one. And that was decades ago. And it's impossible to get one through right now, which means we're stuck with things like the Electoral College and other things I could mention. So no, I don't have high hopes for that at all. Do you? Do you feel differently than I do?
Oh. Sherry also asked you to comment on the Electoral College with respect to gerrymandering.
Well, with respect to gerrymandering. Okay, well, gerrymandering, this again, we have a Supreme Court that has said, no, we're not going to even look at gerrymandering. That's up to you guys in the states. And so you're gonna see a difference. It probably will evolve to a more fair system over time. But you saw New York make a step for it with a constitutional amendment saying it has to be fair. That did not work in the favor of Democrats this year, and Democrats are in charge of the legislature. So I think you're going to see us fall back to the old way. If there were fair maps, you might see more fairness in the Electoral College, but still the overall system is just wrong. It just gives too much power. Why does Wyoming get 2 senators and a say in the Congress, and New York and California and Texas get the same? It just, by population, it just doesn't make any sense. You could fight it, for example, by adding more states. DC should have representation. So should Puerto Rico. I think, why do we keep leaving it up to the Puerto Ricans? I think we should just make them a state. And that'll never happen either because they're very likely to be Democratic, and there's not 2 Republican leaning entities that I could think of that you would add in. So I think that we're stuck with the system that we have, and that means you have to work around it, which Americans are usually pretty good at. So the idea of holding primaries, for example, remember the idea that all of the states were going to hold it on one day, or they were going to pass laws that said your electors had to go with whoever was chosen by the popular vote. Those are like smaller reforms, but they're pretty effective if you can push them through. That would be my thought. That's what I would be working on, what I would want to push. What do you think about the national popular vote idea, where states commit to having their electors vote for whoever? That's what we're just talking about. It is a partial step. It is very effective. I don't see it happening in all the states.
at least all at once. So it not only is it small, it's going to be gradual. And Democrats, I'm making an assumption that you all are like-minded liberals, as I am. And if there are Trump lovers here, you're welcome to push back. We'll jump all over you if you do, but you are welcome to push back. I think that liberals to win their way are going to have to push this over a long period of time. One thing that we've learned, and it took us a long time, the Republicans learned it much faster than us, was to start building political systems from the grassroots up. So long before us, Republicans were going after state legislatures. You're now in this election, I'm hearing people talk about we have to win back governorships, we have to win back state legislatures. It's not enough. Obama in the presidency was not enough. And that's one reason Roe v. Wade fell. Over 50 years, the Republicans worked steadily to put in judges who would vote the way they wanted, to put in state legislators who would put in legislation that's opposed to what the popular opinion is, but very effective. Now you're seeing in the past, 5 years, you're seeing Republicans move towards school boards because that's the new area of conflict. Even in my South Colony district, there were 2 people running for the school board who were deniers in the last round, who wanted to come in just to disrupt. And I say this because I considered running for the school board. I care about those issues. I know a lot about it. I'd be a good school board member. So I thought about it and I decided it wasn't time because A, I hadn't been going to meetings. So I don't know the issues, right? I'm inexperienced. And 2, I don't have kids myself in the school system. My kids went to school elsewhere, although I am a product of the school system. And I thought that my voice would be as a retired person. These are people who normally vote against school board calls for money, calls for budget. And I would be a voice for why senior citizens ought to support our schools. But I said, no, I'll wait. I'm gonna spend a year going to school board meetings. I'll look to see if there are other candidates that maybe I should support rather than run myself. And then I see people on the ballot who have no experience whatsoever with the schools, who have not done anything looking at school board governance. I covered it for years, so I'm far more qualified on that. And who had no qualms about just getting up and saying, no, I'm the best vote. And unfortunately, they lost. I think there was a big effort by people locally. I hope I was a part of it. I certainly promoted them on my Facebook page to try to stop these people. We got out a vote at the school board election bigger than they'd ever seen in school board elections before. I think that's what Democrats have to do. What Republicans have been doing for a long time, go back to the grassroots and build slowly among people who really care and have the expertise and the know-how of the communities. The quality of the Democratic candidates this year was noticeably great. And even Mitch McConnell had to talk about the candidate quality, right? And that's it. When Democrats find people who are part and parcel of the communities that they would represent, who can speak not just articulately, but who will go out and shake hands and knock on doors and do the things that got Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton elected in New York, that's when they'll start winning and winning elections big. So
Al asked you to comment on Trump and election deniers.
Oh, wow. They did so lousy, didn't they? Wasn't that sweet? That was my favorite part of it. When Fetterman won, I was just yelling at that screen. He consistently did what Trump does, which is to hog all the attention to himself. So he would go to rally for his candidates and he would speak about himself. He did that with J.D. Vance, for example, in Ohio. That rally was all about Trump and referred to him, my boy Vance here, who was licking my butt. Oh, that was charming, wasn't it? And he hurt. First of all, his only litmus test for him endorsing and supporting a candidate was whether they backed him. Were they loyal to him? Were they willing to say the election was a hoax? And that's not enough. That is not enough even for Republicans, as we saw. And he was blasted for it. Now there's DeSantis came out, he did splendidly. And so now he's supposedly the new candidate and Republicans have finally learned their lesson. Do you believe that? Because I want to believe it, but I don't.
I thought surely Republicans learned their lesson when Trump had to be indicted for a second time, when he led an insurrection on the Capitol. He's done horrible. When he put kids in jail, wasn't that enough to turn off Republicans? And it does for like about a week or two, and then they turn back and they start supporting him again. So I'm not ready to say that he's completely knocked out, but he ought to be. And I think that there are at least more Republicans now than there were before the midterms who are talking about, isn't it time that we move on? Yeah, the margin, Sherry is saying, yay, hooray for Fetterman, but the margins were not large enough to support optimism. The margins are not big enough anywhere. And I will go to the Georgia race. How Herschel Walker has come within a hair's breadth of getting into the US Senate is a cause of shame for all of us. That is Trump and the Republicans saying, anybody we pick, you should just vote for because they're Republicans. That's tribal voting. It doesn't show any intelligence, any concern for your community. I mean, the man has head injury. He has brain injury. He cannot. Have you heard his speeches, his comments about our good air is all going over to China, so it's China's fault that there's air pollution, that there are too many trees, so we don't really need to support climate. I mean, it's just idiotic. Fetterman, there's reason for that election to have been close. I fault Democrats for this. He had a major stroke the day before the primary in Pennsylvania, a major stroke. He's not come clean about exactly what his health problems are. He has an underlying heart condition that I want to know a whole lot about. I think he could die in office. That is, and if you want to call me anti-disabled people for that, fine. But this happened on the roundtable. One of the other panelists said, what does health have to do with leadership anyway? If you die, you're not a good leader. And that could happen to Fetterman. So if you're leery about voting for him, I think that was smart. Now, if the other guy, the Democrat that Fetterman beat in the primary, had run, I think he stood an equally great chance of beating Oz. Mehmet had lots of problems. He's not from Pennsylvania. He still has real big ties with New Jersey. He's got a really interesting record on integrity. He has none. He was a beatable candidate. What I do love about the Fetterman-Oz race is that the Republicans poured money into that race, tons of money that might instead have gone into New York or New Hampshire, and the Dems might not have come out with a good result there. So there you go. What else?
Roland mentions that inflation is a global issue, but yet it was used as a national issue.
Yeah, I mean, we're stupid in America, I think, voters, that is, because we always blame or give credit to the president in charge for the economic situation of the country. So Donald Trump getting credit for the best economy on earth ever in history, was that fair? No, it was not. That was a whole lot more to do with Obama than it did with than Trump. And the same way with Biden getting blamed for inflation, which indeed is global, has much more to do with the pandemic than with any policies that he put into place. Yet that's the way we've always done it. If you're in office when things are good, you get credit. If things are bad, you get the blame. And the other side doesn't even have to offer an alternative program. So yes, it was used by the Republicans. I don't think it stood them in good stead because the economic picture is so murky. Why do we have a great job market? You can get a job if you want one now. Why are wages going up? Why is America still, kicking ass globally? We still have the currency that everybody wants. This is not a depression. The economists are arguing about whether we're in or going into a depression. It's economics. It's not politics. I'm reading some of the comments. Yes, we're stupid and self-centered and refuse to see the global perspective. Yes, yes, yes. Did you hear any discussion of foreign affairs at all in this election? Nothing. And even the idea of climate change, which is certainly global, that did not get a lot of attention. On Walker, the Republicans hold their noses to stop Biden judicial nominees. What is illogical about that? That's true. It was tribal that we need any Republican in there to just stop stop Biden. If they had control of both houses, they would definitely stop Biden. Absolutely. But now we have a Georgia runoff where the Senate is already decided. It's already Democratic. You put Herschel in there, he is not going to change that. So will Republicans still vote for Herschel Walker in the runoff election? I think that's going to be pretty interesting. I think the Warnock was ahead in the counting, didn't have a 50% plurality, but he certainly was ahead of Herschel Walker. And now Herschel's main qualification that he's a Republican and so could swing the Senate is gone. So I think the chances for the Dems to have a real majority, 51 instead of 50 votes, I think they're high. And it has lots of benefits. First, we'd have a completely unqualified candidate who would be stopped, Herschel Walker, of course. Second, the Dems would be in charge and they could make some real reforms, some real decision making, maybe even stop the filibuster. And third, we would be shutting down the cinema mansion energy cabal, which I wrote today on a Facebook. They would no longer have the power that they do. So, Frank, this is where I differ from you. Your view, Frank, I recommend that you all get it. It was in the Times Union Perspective section front yesterday. Frank wrote about how the GOP in control, even as it turns out, of just the House, will have terrible implications. And Frank is definitely not wrong. We're going to see a bunch of stupid investigations because a committee chair can call these investigations. So we're going to take a look at Merrick Garland and his so-called weaponizing of the Justice Department. We're going to see Hunter Biden is going to be dragged over the coals. I mean, I wish they would just indict the guy and let him go to trial and get it over with. We're so nice to white collar criminals in this country. Nothing bad is going to happen to him anyway. He should not even be worried. We're going to see Hunter Biden investigations. We are going to see the FBI's handling of anything related to Trump. That will be investigated. And you might even see Joe and others impeached. But it will go nowhere because the Senate is in Democratic hands. So, but to me, that's a good thing, because when they're doing that stupid stuff, they're not going to be doing harmful measures in other areas. And I think they will look as foolish as they did when they held 9 hearings on Benghazi. Hillary Clinton was able to acquit herself, and I have no doubt at all that Merrick Garland and Joe Biden will also be unable to acquit themselves if called in. So let them stay busy with their little stupid stuff. Meanwhile, in the Senate, which is in U.S. Dem control, there's a chance to do something about the filibuster, to pass meaningful reform on elections, to pass the Joe Lewis bill, name it, to pass any of the reforms that we should have been working on since Trump got out of office. Use of presidential pardon could be looked at. The emoluments clause, which was so disregarded by Trump, that could be given some teeth. You could see some real action. And you don't need the House to do that. The Senate could really get the ball rolling on a lot of these things. The one area where there is a danger, and Frank points that out too, is in the House is going to be so crazy. It's going to be divided between the super MAGAs and more moderate Republicans, and who will wield the most power. It'll be up to the Speaker to hold them in control. And McCarthy is no Pelosi. He is not smart enough. He is not influential enough. He's not liked enough, I think, to hold them both together. And they're both sides are going to be calling for attention and for more power from him. So the MAGA, the ultra MAGAs, are perfectly content to say either you cut and eliminate Medicare and Social Security, or we're going to not we're not going to raise the debt ceiling, and America won't be able to pay its bills. I think there's a real danger of that, and I don't know how you combat it. I hope Chuck Schumer does.
Thank you. And Sue asked, why did we not hear Democrats talking about the very good reasons for bail reform and why we needed it?
Yeah, I think I answered that one earlier. Yeah, I think I answered that one. Do you want to hear more? Do you have a further comment about that?
I don't. Sue asked, but And Al asked about a Biden referendum.
Yeah. Was this a referendum on Biden? I think that it was. Yes, because all elections are a referendum on the incumbents. And I think that Democrats would have done better and gotten higher numbers if he were more popular. I don't think we totally eliminated that. On the other hand, it was a double referendum because Trump was on trial in this election too. And he is so much more hated, has so much more to answer for, that it turned on that. So Biden, in comparison to Trump, looks good enough that it didn't hurt him nearly as much as it might have.
Thank you. And Robert Bosca asks, as the world gets even more complex than it already is, can we ever expect voters to prioritize societal sustainability, survival issues over personal issues?
Yeah, that's another one that we did earlier because I said, no, I don't think so. If you can't get them, if you can't get them talking on climate. Here's some, I want to show you some maps that I have up here, or charts rather. This is on voter turnout in presidential elections and midterms. And here at the end, you can see how high the vote, look at these numbers here. 49% voted in a midterm in 2018. That's still the record. It does not look like 2022 will beat that, but look, it's from 56 to 49. That's such a much, the levels are higher and they're not dropping as much as they used to. Look at 92, you have 61% of people voted in the presidential election. And then you go down to the next year and it's much
Excuse
lower.
me, I don't think we're seeing
Sorry.
those
We're not
slides.
seeing that.
You're not seeing,
No.
wait.
You have to hit screen share.
Okay, I
Hit
thought
your down arrow.
yeah, hold on, give me
Sharing
one.
the first
I
slide.
told you I'm bad at this. Let me get rid of some of this other stuff. Have you seen?
Yeah, but you're good at everything else.
Oh yeah, I'm so I have too much on my screen. It's just making me confused. I can't even find you guys. All right, it says I am screen sharing.
Just close the old one.
Is it the same PowerPoint?
There we go. Here we go. No, it's different. It is different, but I'm not and share screen. Let me see what I get. If I can't do this, I'm going to just give it up. Yeah, let's forget about it. Anyway, the chart is just simply showing that voter turnout in every election is higher than it has been by percentage of eligible voters. And the dip between presidential on years and off years is growing smaller. That's what it shows. And I also wanted to show you the page on the New York Daily News, which was Humpty Trumpty. I couldn't even build a wall. And this is Trump's favorite newspaper, and they were dissing him. So the referendum definitely was in place on Trump, and he did not pass it. So that's hugely important for Democrats as they consider what to do next. Lindsey Graham was speaking at a rally with Walker. He says that his token candidate was proof that the R's are not racist. Oh my God. And Lindsey Graham has gone crazy. He is not even making sense. What he told the Fox audience the other day was that you had to vote for Herschel Walker because the Democrats were out to keep Blacks from turning conservative. And so you had to support him so that other Blacks could be conservative too. And then Van Johnson on CNN said, that doesn't even make sense. Who's stopping any Black person from becoming conservative except for the stupid conservative policies that don't help Black people? That's what's doing it. But Lindsey has just gone crazy. Yeah. He is, I think Herschel Walker is indeed a token for the Republican Party. Is that completely fair? Yeah, it is, because I think he's totally manipulated by Trump and others. I wouldn't say that about Tim Scott, for example. Why isn't he the Republican mascot for getting more minorities into the party? He would be more effective. Elise Stefanik is the poster child for getting more women into the Republican Party. I still remain flummoxed by any woman or Black who would vote Republican in these times, I have to say. So.
Sherry comments acknowledge that climate control has become a liberal issue, but that's only because it's tied into the business paradigm. Dems and Republicans will both suffer.
They will both suffer. On the other hand, there's so much money to be made in the alternative energy field. Obama showed that. He created thousands of new jobs when he started promoting solar and wind, that I don't understand why the Republicans have not embraced it. And I think that they will eventually, because they're going to be pushed by corporations who do have more business sense than some Republican politicians. And they're seeing the writing on the wall. The public is in favor of climate change, or climate regulation, and there's money and jobs to be had in it. Hell, even the oil companies are investing in solar and other alternative forms, because that is where money in the future is going to be. They're just totally on the losing side on this. The question is whether they make the change in time to save the planet. I'm so relieved that for at least the next 2 years while Biden is president, we're not going to fall any further back on climate regulation than we have already.
Thank
So.
you. Michael Crowell mentions that.
Post, New York Post. Sorry, I'm sorry, Fred. Karen has corrected me. I said Daily News. It's the New York Post who had the Humpty Dumpty thing. Thank you.
Michael asks if anyone has heard the recent episode of This American Life that talked about the constitutional amendment in Ohio that prescribed concretely what a fair map is, but, well, we don't want to spoil it. And it has a link to the transcript.
No, I don't know that, but I will look at it. I think that redistricting and gerrymandering, that is, we all need to be paying attention to that, our politicians and us. It just doesn't make any sense. It should be a federal law that all maps have to be fair. And that if there is a dominant party, that gets reflected. You do get more seats than the other side. You just don't get all of them. And they're not all at the cost of blacks, as Florida has. They took all of that map takes nearly all of the blacks and puts them in one district, and they can like battle it, or a couple of districts, I'm exaggerating, and they battle it out there rather than being possible contenders in a number of different places. That, the other thing that we've misconstrued, I think, is the Latino vote. Democrats, especially towards the end of the campaign season, were saying, oh, no, we're losing the Latinos. Oh, my God, we're going to do terrible. Look at these votes. All of the polling, all of the numbers came from Florida, where there's a very specific Latino population. It's Cuban, highly susceptible to anything that smacks of socialism. So calling a Democrat a socialist in Florida has a lot of effect there. And it's old. If you look at Arizona and Texas and other states on the border, the population is not Cuban. It tends to come from Mexico and Latin America, and it's very young. And so issues like abortion and climate change and jobs plays to them in a completely different way than in Florida. I am concerned that Miami-Dade voted overwhelmingly Republican. They haven't voted for a Republican governor in 20 years. That's really bad. But I think that Florida is so skewed right now by DeSantis's complete dominance of the political system at every level, that we're not seeing a true picture of what's happening, of what really is going on there. That's going to take some while to shake out.
Yeah. And Barbara asks, why would one party use alternative voting methods more than the other?
Well, it's one of these crazy things. Why would one party have encouraged its followers to go get COVID shots and the other doesn't? And the results are overwhelmingly evident that blue states had fewer deaths than red states. So these policies had an effect. And I think it comes from Trump, from just crazy. He decided that he wanted to throw doubt on the election. All of the early indications from early on were that he was not going to win in 2020. So he's throwing doubt on it. And one of the ways to do that is to attack the places where voting by mail and absentee voting was very heavy. Those tended to be in the Northeast. They tend to be liberal blue states. And so he went after it. And I don't think it has any bearing. There's no proof, 62 court cases Trump tried to bring, that any meaningful fraud existed. Where there has been fraud, it's been found out and punished. Look at Rensselaer County in our own area. The fraud does not exist on a broad area. So why they're pushing that, I don't know. Voting should be as easy as possible.
Voting should be on a holiday. It should not just be one day. For that matter, it should not just be in person. Why do we make it hard? Why do you need any ID at all? The Constitution says you have to be an adult who lives in America. So why do I have to show my driver's license to vote? It's just crazy.
Deborah asks, should Biden run again? And if not, who should run?
Boy, that's a very good question and being hotly debated now. First of all, I want to say that I, in general, don't believe in people over 80 holding positions of responsibility. Is that ageist? Yes, it is. I admit it freely. But if you, and I know that everybody is different and that some people can soldier on to their hundreds, but in general and overwhelmingly, when you hit your 80s, you slow down. Your health is not the same. Your thinking is not the same. I see it in myself, and I know absolutely that I am not the same now as I was when I was 40 and 50. So that's a prejudice. Second, Biden did make a promise, and I didn't take it seriously at the time, but he did say he was going to run only one term, and he accomplished so much. History is going to be very kind to him. He really did help to return things to normal after the Trump years.
Yes.
So should he be returned to office? I don't know. I do think that he is slower now than he was. I do see some cognitive decline. But here's the problem. Who's going to run if it isn't Joe Biden? Kamala Harris has been a failure. She is, what has she done? What does she stand for? And I was a big Kamala supporter. I thought she was fantastic in the Senate. I thought she was going to really shake up things, and she has not. She's got 2 years now to turn that around. I don't know if she can do it. So that's gloomy. On the other hand, I think the Democrats have shown themselves to have a deeper bench than we originally thought. I would point to Gavin Newsom in California, Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. I'm going to watch, what's his name, Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. He's a possible. I mean, that's a moderate Republican in the Biden mold, sharp guy. There are candidates that can run and can beat a DeSantis, Nikki Haley ticket, for example, or certainly a Trump Stefanik ticket. I think that we have a better bench than we want to. But the issue of ageism and getting people who are incompetent out of office is not bipartisan. It's not partisan. It's a problem that affects both sides. I love Dianne Feinstein. I think she's a hero of American politics, but she has dementia. She should not be in the Senate. Chuck Grassley, what the hell? What is Iowa thinking of? He's 89 years old, and they've given him a 6-year term. This is not good. This is not good recruiting, and it's not good voting. Say that.
Oh, Lord.
Andy comments on Walker. The Republicans hold their noses to stop Biden judicial nominees. What is illogical about that?
Yeah, we talked about this too, and that was certainly, I think, a reason he came as close as he did, undeservedly so, in the general election. But now we have a runoff, and whether Walker is in or out of the Senate, Democrats are still in charge. They will still be making decisions about judicial appointments. And so I hope that we will see far fewer people turning out for him than you did in the general election. Yeah.
And, Sue mentions that the Republicans have started talking about cutting aid to Ukraine.
Yeah, that was McCarthy who started that. And again, the Senate is in charge. That isn't going to happen. You got Senate in Democratic hands and the presidency. It isn't going to happen. That's a threat. We don't have to worry about it again, at least for 2 more years. I hope by then that war is settled. But yeah, that was one. But the worst mistake the Republicans made, Rick Scott, who first of all is infighting with the Senate, McConnell. The two of them were at odds through the whole thing. Rick Scott was put in charge of running Republican Senate campaigns. And he, rather than listening to McConnell, who hate the guy, but he certainly knows what he's doing. He's a great tactician. And what he said was, make it about the economy, make it about crime. Rick Scott instead comes out with his own agenda on what he wants. Right on the top of that is cut Social Security and Medicare. How did that help Republicans? How? I mean, is anybody really in favor of that outside of our Senate, outside of the Congress? I thought that's really scary. And I think that helped a lot of the Democratic talking points was that, no, we're not going to cut your Social Security.
Right. And Andy asks, will the Democrats be smart enough to use House Republicans' overreach to build a true working majority in 2024?
Oh, you tell me that. I certainly think it's a problem if you overestimate Democratic ability to handle these sorts of things. We don't do well. Democrats do well at governing. Biden has been a great president. He's passed bipartisan bills. He's got big issues through, but getting the message out, forging, he didn't do anything about getting a successor. I think Kamala is a big problem for him. And using the problems of the other side to help yourself, that's not a strong point either. But I unlike Frank, who just sees doom and gloom with the Republicans in charge of the House, and he may be right, it'll be interesting. We'll have to compare notes in 6 months, Frank. I think that the infighting in the House is going to hurt them. It's going to make them look as extreme and as wacko as they are. And that did not help in this election. I don't think it'll help going forward. So.
Donna asks, did Cortez win? And she's wondering when the violence will start with the Patriots.
Oh, yeah. Cortez did win, which is how the Democrats now are in control. Still out is of course, the Herschel Walker campaign. He's running against Raphael Warnock. So that's the only one that's left. I don't know about Murkowski. Actually, I'm speaking out of turn. It's been changing so quickly. I don't know if she won yet or not. So I don't think we quite have the Senate seats in order yet. All of them. The violence. I think that there's a huge danger of political violence in our society. I thought the attack on Paul Pelosi was absolutely horrifying, along the same lines as January 6th. And as much as the violence, the blasé kind of, make a joke about it reaction of the Republicans was shocking. And so I listened to my sons about this. They're both young. My two older sons are both of the much younger generation than my boomer peers. And they have been worried about violence for a long time. They both have gotten gun permits and take gun safety, which I don't approve of course. Although now I'm thinking maybe I should join them. I do think there's a real danger there, that it's somehow become acceptable in Republican eyes that this isn't a big deal, and it should be. It certainly is. I think we're going to see a lot more. Here's another thing that goes along with violence. This is not original to me. I read it and I can't remember where. So if it's one of you guys, I apologize for stealing your idea. I don't mean to plagiarize, but I am. And that is that the January 6th committee has done a terrific job pinning Trump to what happened, to showing his culpability. But there were other players in this that we haven't gone after. Law enforcement, the Capitol Police, the National Guard, the FBI. Where were they? There was lots of information that January 6th was going to be a mess, and yet no protection was taken, no increase in force, no call for help. Why? We don't have the answers to that, and that worries me a lot. So these are the political violence questions I have. I think we are right to be worried about it.
Frank Robinson comments that the Republicans push voter fraud as a pretext to make voting harder.
Yeah, I think that's become really abundantly clear. And the Democrats haven't done a whole lot to protect voter rights. They can't get, I thought the Lewis bill should totally have passed. And they couldn't move that through past McConnell. So the problem, of course, with their argument is that they can't prove it. There's just, the evidence is just all quite to the contrary, that there's not a lot of voter fraud. And I really love Dominion and Smart Tech, which sued, which has brought
big, giant, scary defamation suits against Fox and other players who went in for the conspiracy without any evidence. And that the money involved in those lawsuits is big enough that it actually did bring about some change in misinformation that we were seeing, the right-wing media that was going along with the Republican scenario of voter fraud. So that was good news.
And Sherry comments that Trump votes by absentee ballot, and he received the initial COVID vaccine, and she used that to engage folks in non-confrontational violence, but had to give up.
Yeah.
The supporters are.
Well, here's
Not violence,
another-
dialogue.
here's another
Dialogue.
thing. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I use those talking points to engage in dialogue, not violence.
Oh,
Right,
sorry.
right.
I'm a lover, not a fighter.
You know, here's another thing that we've learned from watching politics in the Trump era, and that is that there's no penance for hypocrisy. McConnell, chief among them. Oh no, Obama can't appoint Merrick Garland. He's only in office for another year. But I can appoint Amy Coney Barrett, even though there's like no time left. People are already voting. Let's put her in anyway. Did he get punished for that? No, he did not. And Trump, the same way. He got the best medicine and the best attention possible when he had COVID, and yet he's telling others, no, you don't need protection, even though, of course, they're not going to get that at all what he did. Hypocrisy doesn't matter. The Republicans don't care. They're in it to win at all costs. And many people in America find that admirable. They think it's a cool way to fight. That's where you should be. You know, we're a party. The Democrats are a party of statesmen. And so we still applaud Al Gore, who got up and said, well, it's time to step aside and put America first. You didn't. Hillary did the same. One of her best speeches was that concession speech when she must have been in such huge pain. I love her for that. Can you see Trump doing that? Trump didn't even go to the inauguration. What a sore loser. Ugh.
Yes.
So there you go.
And Donna, speaking of hypocrisy, says the Republicans wonder why they didn't do well. They also have insisted that elections are rigged, not to be trusted, yet they beg Republicans to go and vote.
Right. I mean, yeah, and it's just so odd the way the fraud works. It's only when Republicans lose, that's when there's fraud. If they win, it's great. It's the great American system. I mean, there's no logic to it. There's no real common sense to it. It's very disheartening. And I go back to, I mostly blame American voters. One of the old adages of press punditry that I now have proclaimed out of date is that always trust the American people to do what's right. I don't think that's true. The Trump election in 2016 cured me of that belief. I think they can be led, and increasingly it's easier to lead them. The technology, the use of social media, the distrust in the media, the distrust in the military. What mistrust in the church? What institution stands anymore that we listen to? None. So
I would just want to make a comment that I've read a number of books over the years that indicate that people, once are engaged emotionally, their logic or reasoning powers are suppressed.
yeah,
And Trump and the Republicans, they're appealing to emotion. That's
Yeah,
all they're
they are.
doing. And
Fear.
they don't think anymore.
fear is a very Libby Post says this all the time, that if you want to appeal to emotion, there's a limited number of emotions you appeal to. Hope and love, that's
Right.
totally the Democrats, or fear and resentment, and that's the Republican side. And we've seen which side is winning. It's easier to put out messages of fear and intimidation than the opposite.
And Carol mentions that Trump is not a young man either.
Yeah, that's true. Again, hypocrisy doesn't matter. Trump is just he's within a few years of Biden,
And there were also, during his presidency, there were also the same sort of videos that Republicans are now looking at, showing him shuffling, slurring his words, misspeaking, losing his place, just acting like an idiot. And we were all saying, oh, he's got dementia. I followed a guy until I just realized what a jerk he was on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter now since Elon Musk, but I was at the time. And I followed him because he purported to show the signs of dementia in every Trump address. And it's the same wishful thinking that I think Republicans have when they see calamity in every word that Biden stammers. It's just not there.
Yeah. Sherry comments that the Democratic president wannabes are not public enough or well known. I hope there's enough time, whereas Republicans are in the public eye.
This is true. DeSantis already has been in the eye for some time, not always in good ways, however, that he's got that same cruel streak that Trump has, that little stunt sending people trying to make a new home in the United States, shipping them off to Martha's Vineyard. That was just atrocious. And
There's the name recognition.
yeah, the name recognition is absolutely there, though. Yeah. Well, even if it's Kamala Harris, who should be the heir apparent, the Democrats are still going to have to spend a whole lot of time on preparing the next person, because it isn't evident right now.
Yeah. And Sue mentions that the Murkowski race has not been called. The Republican
Thank you.
is currently ahead by a couple of percentage points, unfortunately.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
I like Murkowski. She's one of the few Republicans who can be relied on to vote for common sense and reason. Tell me why Republicans like, not even the whack job ones, the ones like, I don't know, Susan Collins. How can you vote against infrastructure? Why? Why are you? It's no other reason than to make McConnell happy and Joe Biden look bad. That's not serving your country.
No.
So, yeah.
And Sherry asked if Dominion won the lawsuit.
No, it's still in process, still in progress. Yeah, but it's already, you've seen Fox News move away from declarations about fraud. There have been filings that have been delicious to read, admitting that, oh, no one would believe what Hannity has to say. It's entertainment, which of course most of us already know, but not many Fox viewers do. So I really do think that one way to stop disinformation are powerful entities bringing lawsuits against false claims like that.
And Donna comments regarding church and state that Lauren Boebert rallied that the church should rule the state. They do this in the open, yet so many people vote for her.
Really, I did not know she said that. What is?
Oh yeah, I've seen a video myself.
I know her gun stuff. I didn't know her
Yeah.
separation of church and state stuff. Well, it's just so anti-American. It's anti-First Amendment, which deserves a whole lot more attention than that Second Amendment. I mean, it's been a mainstay of this country from the first days. I just read. I just got done reading Hamilton, the Ron Chernow book that Lynn Emanuel made famous. But from those earliest days, separating the matters of state from matters of the church was vital to make things run right here. And more so now that we're more pluralistic, we have more religions than we did. They're not all Christian. I just think that's one of the real big problems with the Supreme Court, which seems to be taking a stand not for religious freedom, but for Christian freedom. I think that's really dangerous, and we're going to see more of that too. So, okay. Everybody's still interested? Or we still, what time is it? Wow.
I have a question, if I can just kind of butt in here.
Good, please.
Why is there no accountability or penalty for the Republicans not doing their job as far as hearing nominees for Supreme Court justices, et cetera? I don't know any other job where there's no accountability.
Well, there is, and they're called elections, and we just held some accountable. But here's the real problem, and as I see it, I blame Barack Obama because he appointed Merrick Garland, And Merrick Garland was shut out. McConnell shut him out. That was the first time we ever saw that. Why did Obama not go to the Supreme Court as it existed at that time and say, this is not constitutional, they have to act? I think he would have won that. And he didn't, because Democrats then were smug, and we all thought that Hillary would get in and she'd point someone even more liberal than Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland is exactly the kind of person who should be on the Supreme Court. He's moderate, he's deliberate, he is not partisan. I think he's just an awesome guy. And he took all the things that he's taken criticism from as Attorney General, that he's too slow, that he doesn't want to just go after Trump because he deserves it and he might lose, but so what? Those are all things that make him really a great Supreme Court justice. And Barack Obama let him hang in the wind. And so, of course, McConnell is emboldened after that. There's no way you could bring that suit now. They would lose, I think, in the current Supreme Court. And the second thing is that our institutions, the Supreme Court included among them, as well as the Senate, are allowed to make their own rules. And they're not, the other branches don't speak about them. And the only ones who can change those rules are those who are members. So do you see the Supreme Court, for example, making it a rule that when your spouse is heavily involved in a case, you ought maybe to recuse yourself? Yeah, we need that. We thought we had that because up to the Trump era, most of our officials have acted honorably. That is not happening now. We know that democracy needs to be shored up, but who's going to do it? It has to be done by the Supreme Court. So again, not in my lifetime. And the filibuster is another example of this. The rules can only be changed within the body that made them in the first place.
Self-perpetuating problem.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Put in new people. Chuck Grassley isn't going to change anything. 89 years old. Oh my God.
No, there are no more questions in the comment.
Okay.
I actually have, I'm sorry, this is just, I think I just needed, this is better than therapy, Rosemary. But I just wanted to agree with you. I don't think of myself as a bigoted person or an ageist person, but I happen to actually agree with your point about the 80-year-olds. I never thought about it, you know, and I'm leaning towards agreeing with you on that.
Alan Chartock, age 81, and I disagree on this all the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's something that as our society ages, we ought to be thinking and talking about it, because I see it in Dianne Feinstein. Again, I love her, a hero, a heroine. She does not recognize how impaired she is right now. I see it in my own mother. My own mother has no idea how different she is now than she was even 10 years ago. No idea. So yet, do I leave it in the hands of my mother that she's going to be the one who cooks dinner and cleans the house, or do I just start doing it? And the same, but we do that in the Senate. Dianne Feinstein has no idea. I don't think Chuck Grassley has turned against some of his core beliefs in the last 2 years as senator. Does he recognize that? It's crazy.
Well, we have,
and I mean, the whole idea of disability. I didn't say it at the time because I was a little more circumspect than I am now. But when Gabby Giffords was shot in the head, horrible, just a terrible thing. She remained a representative for months. I think it was almost a year before that was not good. It's terrible what happened to her, but her people were not being represented. It was her office who was running the show. That is not good representation. When you are disabled, when aged, who is the guy? Udall from Utah was another one. Hated his policies, but he was a brilliant man up until about the last couple of years. And then he was like reaching for glasses when they weren't on his head, and he wasn't making any sense. He did not recognize that he was no longer competent. We have to deal with this issue.
we have that in aviation.
In politics. I'm sorry.
We
Go
have that in aviation for pilots.
Yes, we do. We have it for judges. Judges are required to leave at a certain age. Professors are required to. And yes, it does hurt some few people, you know, the statistical minority who manage to keep all their faculties, physical and mental, until the very end. But as a rule, which is what I'm talking about, we need a rule out at 79. Come on.
Thank you. It's been very lively and enlightening.